He came to ask for work, but the rancher found the one truth money could never buy. The first time Silas Mercer tested Caleb Reed, the young cowboy had no idea a dying man was watching from behind the stable door. It happened on a cold April morning in 1886, when the wind rolled hard across the open grasslands of Montana Territory. Dust moved in thin sheets over the yard of the Broken Spur Ranch. A loose shutter knocked against the bunkhouse, and somewhere near the corral, a horse stamped at the frozen ground. Caleb stood alone inside the stable with a leather pouch in his hand. The pouch belonged to Silas. It held nearly $60. That was more money than Caleb had seen in one place since he was a boy. He turned it over once, feeling the weight of the coins against his palm. His coat was worn through at one elbow. The heel of his right boot had begun to split. He had not been paid in 3 weeks because the ranch had lost cattle during the late storm. No one was near him. At least that was what he believed. Caleb looked toward the open stable door. Then he looked down at the pouch again. For one brief moment, he closed his fingers around it. Behind the wall, Silas Mercer held his breath. Silas was 63 years old, though the hard years had made him look older. His hair had gone white around the temples, and a deep line rested between his eyes. He had built the Broken Spur from nothing more than scrubland, a borrowed mule, and a promise he once made to his wife. His wife had been gone 9 years. His strength was leaving more slowly. A doctor in Helena had told him the pain in his chest was not from age alone. Silas had asked how much time he had. The doctor had not answered plainly, which was answer enough. Silas had ridden home, carrying a bottle of medicine he never opened. There were things on the ranch he could settle before death came for him. Deeds could be signed, cattle could be counted, debts could be paid. But one thing could not be settled with ink. His daughter Clara. She was 22 and carried her mother's quiet courage. She knew every pasture on the ranch and could spot a sick calf before men twice her age noticed anything wrong. She kept the household accounts, repaired her own saddle, and never complained when winter trapped them for days. She was also the only person Silas still feared losing. Several men had tried to court her. One arrived wearing a silver watch and talked more about his family's land than he did about Clara. Another promised to build her a grand house, though he spoke sharply to the Mexican cook when he thought no one important was listening. A third smiled like a church window and cheated one of Silas's hands during a card game. Clara had refused them all. Silas was grateful for that. Still, he knew the day would come when she would choose someone. And before his heart failed him, he wanted to know whether that man would protect her peace or slowly take it away. That was why he had begun watching Caleb Reed. Caleb had arrived at the Broken Spur 2 years earlier during a thunderstorm. He had no letter of recommendation and no fine story about himself. His horse was tired, his hat was soaked, and he carried everything he owned in one bedroll. "I heard you might need another hand," he had said. Silas had looked him over from the porch. "What can you do?" "Most things badly the first time," Caleb answered. "Better the second." It was not the sort of answer a proud man gave. Silas hired him for 1 week. Caleb stayed for 2 years. He did not charm people. He did not boast. He spoke little at supper and listened when older hands talked. He could calm a frightened mare without striking her. He mended tools before returning them. When he broke a gate hinge during his first month, he told Silas before anyone discovered it and offered to pay for the iron. Silas had noticed all of it. So had Clara. Caleb did not know that. He believed Clara saw him as another ranch hand, a man who carried feed sacks and rode fence lines. He made certain to keep it that way. He removed his hat when she spoke to him. He answered her questions clearly. He never stayed near her longer than the work required. That distance had begun to trouble Clara more than she wished to admit. A week earlier, she had found him behind the barn repairing a wooden toy horse that belonged to the cook's little boy. One leg had broken off. Caleb had carved a new one from pine and painted it with leftover fence stain. "You could have thrown it away," Clara had said. Caleb had not looked up. "The boy didn't throw me away when I was new here," he replied. Clara had carried those words with her ever since. Now, inside the stable, Caleb loosened his grip on Silas's money pouch. He crossed the yard toward the main house. Silas stepped away from the wall and walked through the side entrance before Caleb could see him. By the time the young man reached the porch, Silas was seated at the kitchen table with an open ledger in front of him. Caleb knocked once. "Come in." He entered with dust on his shoulders and the pouch in his hand. "Found this beside the grain chest," he said. Silas glanced at it as though it meant nothing. "Did you count it?" "No, sir." That surprised him. "Why not?" Caleb placed the pouch on the table. "Because it wasn't mine to count." For several seconds, only the ticking wall clock made a sound. Silas studied the young man's face. Caleb did not shift his feet or look proud of himself. He simply stood there waiting to be dismissed. "Thank you," Silas said. Caleb nodded and turned toward the door. Then the pain struck Silas without warning. His hand tightened around the edge of the table. The room seemed to tilt. A sharp pressure drove beneath his ribs, stealing the air from his lungs. Caleb heard the chair scrape. He turned quickly. Silas tried to speak, but no words came. The young cowboy crossed the room and caught him before he fell. At that same moment, Clara stepped in from the hallway. She saw her father bent against Caleb's shoulder, his face pale, one hand pressed to his chest. The basket in her arms dropped to the floor. Apples rolled across the boards. "Pa." Silas lifted his head and looked at his daughter. For the first time in her life, Clara saw fear in his eyes. And hidden beneath the open ledger, only inches from her hand, was the sealed letter Silas had written the night before. On the front were 5 words. "For Clara after I am gone." Clara reached her father before the last apple stopped rolling. "Pa, look at me." Silas tried to straighten, but Caleb kept one arm firm around his back. "I'm all right," Silas said. The words came thin and broken. "No, you are not," Clara replied. She dropped to her knees beside him and pressed trembling fingers against his wrist. She had seen ranch hands kicked by horses and men carried in from winter storms. She knew how fear changed a person's face. Her father's lips had lost their color. Caleb eased Silas into the chair. "Should I ride for the doctor?" Silas shook his head at once. "Helena is too far." "There's Dr. Hayes in Red Creek," Clara said. "He is still 2 hours away," Silas answered. "Then Caleb can make it in one." The old rancher looked from his daughter to the young man beside him. Pain still pulled at the corners of his eyes, but his voice slowly returned. "No doctor." Clara stared at him. "You nearly fell to the floor." "I got dizzy." "You held your chest." "I said I am all right." That was the tone Silas used when he wanted a gate closed, a horse sold, or a question buried. Most people obeyed it. Clara did not. She rose slowly and faced him across the table. "How long?" Silas looked down at his hand. Caleb stepped back. He understood that the question was not meant for him, but leaving felt wrong. Silas was still breathing hard, and Clara's face had gone as pale as her father's. "How long have you known?" she asked again. The room seemed smaller now. Wind pushed against the window, and the lamp flame moved inside its glass. Silas glanced toward Caleb. "Go see to the south herd." Caleb did not move. "With respect, sir, I think I should stay until you can stand." Silas's eyes narrowed. Caleb met them without challenge. Clara looked at him, and something quiet passed between them. Gratitude, perhaps, or surprise that someone had refused Silas Mercer without raising his voice. Silas finally leaned back. "The South herd can wait." Clara's gaze fell to the ledger. The edge of the sealed letter showed beneath it. She reached for it. Silas moved faster than a sick man should have. His palm came down over the envelope. "Not yet." Clara read the words before he pulled it away. "For Clara after I am gone." Her breathing changed. Caleb lowered his eyes, but it was too late. He had seen it too. Clara stood still, as though the floor beneath her had turned to ice. "What did the doctor tell you?" Silas pressed the envelope against the table. "That my heart is weak." "When?" "Last winter." "You have known since last winter." "I was waiting for the right time." Clara gave a small, bitter laugh. "And when was that meant to be? After we buried you?" Silas flinched harder at her words than he had at the pain. Caleb looked toward the doorway. He wanted to leave them their privacy, yet he feared Silas might collapse again the moment he stepped outside. Clara folded her arms tightly across herself. "You rode to Helena alone. You came back with medicine and told me it was for your joints." "It was easier." "For whom?" Silas had no answer. The wind struck the house again. Outside, a horse shifted near the hitching rail and rattled the leather reins. Clara turned away and pressed both hands against the kitchen counter. Her shoulders stayed straight, but Caleb saw one of them tremble. Silas watched her with a grief he did not know how to speak. He had spent his life fixing things with rope, iron, land, and work. None of those could repair the silence growing between him and his daughter. "Clara," he said. She did not turn. "I did not tell you because I did not want you living every day afraid." She looked back then. "You decided I was too weak for the truth." "No. That is exactly what you decided." Silas lowered his head. Caleb had never seen him do that. The old man was known across 2 counties for standing firm when banks called in loans and blizzards killed half the valley's cattle. Yet before his daughter's hurt, he looked suddenly tired. "I was trying to protect you," he said. Clara's eyes shone, but no tears fell. "You cannot protect someone with a lie." The words settled heavily over the room. Caleb felt them strike him too. He thought of every feeling he had hidden behind silence. Every morning he had kept his eyes on the ground when Clara crossed the yard. Every time he had told himself distance was honorable. Perhaps silence could be honest. Perhaps it could also wound. Silas looked at the money pouch on the table, then at Caleb. The test no longer seemed important. The young man had returned the money. He had also stayed when ordered away. And when Clara had spoken sharply, Caleb had not rushed to judge either of them. He simply remained ready to help. Silas reached for his coat. "I need air." "You need bed," Clara said. "I need air first." He stood, and his knees nearly failed. Caleb caught his elbow. This time Silas did not protest. They helped him to the porch. The cold wind had softened, and late afternoon light lay over the ranch in long golden bands. Men moved near the far corral, unaware that anything had changed. Silas sat in his old wooden chair. Clara brought a blanket and laid it over his legs. Her hands were careful, though her face remained distant. Caleb stepped away. "Stay," Silas said. Caleb stopped. The old rancher looked across the yard toward the northern hills. "There will come a day when this place needs someone stronger than I am." Clara turned sharply. "Do not speak as though you are already gone." "I am speaking because I am still here." Silas rested both hands on the blanket. "The Broken Spur is more than cattle. There are families who depend on it, men who have given years to it, agreements made with nothing but a handshake." His eyes moved to Caleb. "And there are people on this ranch who may not be what they appear." Caleb felt a warning in those words. Before he could ask what Silas meant, a rider came through the main gate at a hard pace. The horse's sides were white with sweat. The man in the saddle wore a dark coat and carried a leather case beneath one arm. He dismounted without waiting for help. Clara recognized him first. Mr. Vale. Edwin Vale was the Mercer family's attorney. He had not visited the ranch in nearly a year. He climbed the porch steps, removed his hat, and looked at Silas with a grave expression. "I came as soon as I received your message." Clara looked at her father. "What message?" Silas said nothing. Vale opened the leather case and removed a stack of documents tied with black ribbon. "I have prepared the new will," he said. Then his eyes shifted to Caleb. "But before Mr. Mercer signs it, there is something all three of you need to know." Silas's face hardened. Vale placed the papers on the porch table. "Someone has been trying to take the Broken Spur from your family." The wind moved across the porch, lifting one corner of the black ribbon around the papers. Clara looked at Edwin Vale as though he had spoken in another language. "Take it from us how?" Vale did not answer at once. He opened his leather case again and removed a folded map, 2 letters, and a small account book with a cracked red cover. Silas leaned forward in his chair. "Show me." Vale spread the map across the porch table. It showed the Mercer property, the north grazing land, the creek crossing, and the narrow trail leading east toward Red Creek. One section had been marked in blue ink. Caleb recognized it immediately. "That is the upper valley," he said. Vale nodded. "The most valuable water on the Broken Spur." Clara stepped closer. "What does that have to do with someone taking the ranch?" Vale opened the red account book. 3 months ago, a claim was filed in Red Creek stating that Silas Mercer borrowed $8,000 against this property. Silas stared at him. "I never borrowed that money." "I know." "Then there is no claim." "There should not be." Vale turned the account book around. A copied signature appeared at the bottom of the page. "Silas Mercer." The old rancher's hand tightened beneath the blanket. Clara looked at the writing, then at her father. "It looks like yours." "It is not." His voice was low, but there was no weakness in it now. Caleb studied the signature from where he stood. The letters were careful and even. Too even. Silas wrote with a heavy hand, pressing hard enough to leave marks on the paper beneath. This signature floated across the page like someone had practiced it. Vale pointed to a second line. "The debt is due at the end of July. If it is not paid, ownership of the upper valley transfers to the lender." "Who is the lender?" Clara asked. Vale looked toward the ranch yard before answering. "Gideon Shaw." Caleb knew the name. Everyone in the valley did. Shaw owned a cattle company south of Red Creek. He wore clean coats, loaned money to desperate ranchers, and somehow ended up owning their land when winter came. He spoke softly in public and never raised his voice, but 3 families had left the territory after doing business with him. Silas's face became hard. "He offered to buy the upper valley last year." Vale nodded. "And you refused." "I told him I would bury myself there before I sold it." "That may be why he chose another method." Clara looked back at the false signature. "Why did no one tell us about this before now?" "The claim was filed quietly. I only learned about it because a clerk in Red Creek remembered your name and sent me a copy." Vale took one of the letters from the case. "This was delivered to my office yesterday." He handed it to Silas. The old man opened it, read 2 lines, and passed it to Clara. The message was short. "Pay the debt by July 31st, or surrender the upper valley without protest. No threat had been written beneath it, none was needed. Clara's hand shook once before she placed the letter on the table. "We will prove the signature is false." "I intend to," Vale said, "but the original loan papers are missing from the county records." Caleb frowned. "How can a claim stand without the papers?" "It should not, yet someone replaced them with a certified copy." Silas looked at Vale. "Someone at the county office is helping him." "Almost certainly." The old rancher turned his eyes toward the yard. The men near the corral were finishing their work. One carried a saddle toward the stable. Another closed the feed shed. Ordinary movements continued under an ordinary evening sky. But nothing felt ordinary now. "Who on this ranch knows the Upper Valley records?" Vale asked. Silas's silence answered before his words did. "Only Clara, my foreman, and me." Caleb looked toward the bunkhouse. "Mr. Danner." Silas gave one slow nod. Harlan Danner had been foreman of the Broken Spur for 11 years. He knew every fence line, every account, every weakness in the ranch. He had also been the man who hired Caleb when Silas was away. Clara shook her head. "Harlan would not betray us." "I did not say he had," Silas replied. "But you thought it." Clara turned away, troubled. She had known Harlan since she was a girl. He had taught her how to throw a rope and once carried her home after a horse dragged her through the sagebrush. The thought of him helping Gideon Shaw felt impossible. Caleb looked at the red account book again. Whoever did this needed more than Silas's signature. Vale raised his eyes. "What do you mean?" They needed to know the Upper Valley was not already tied to another loan. They needed the legal description. They needed to know where Mr. Mercer kept his records. Silas looked at him carefully. Caleb continued. And they needed to believe no one would notice until it was too late. A long silence followed. Clara watched him with a new expression. Until that moment she had seen his kindness, his patience, and the quiet care he gave to every job. Now she saw how closely he observed the world. Silas saw it too. "Vale," he said, "how long do we have?" "Just under 4 months." "And what do you need from me?" "The original deed to the Upper Valley, any old loan records, letters from the bank, anything showing you never used that land as security." Silas looked toward the house. "Those papers are in the iron box in my study." Clara frowned. "No, the iron box is empty." Silas turned to her. "What?" "I checked it last week when I balanced the spring accounts. There was nothing inside but Mother's old photograph." For the second time that day, fear showed in Silas Mercer's eyes. Someone had entered his study. Someone had taken the one document that could save the ranch. If this truth has caught you by surprise, stay close to the story, because the deepest betrayal had not yet stepped into the light. Silas pushed the blanket from his legs. "Caleb, lock the stable and tell the men no one leaves tonight." Vale gathered the papers quickly. Clara looked toward the darkening yard. At the far end of the bunkhouse, a door stood open. A saddled horse was tied behind it. And Harlan Danner was gone. Caleb reached the bunkhouse in less than a minute. The door swung against the wall with every gust of wind. Inside, 2 blankets lay folded at the foot of Harlan Danner's bunk. His spare shirt was gone. So were his heavy coat, rifle belt, and the small tin box he kept beneath the bed. This was not a man stepping out for air. Caleb crossed to the rear window. Beyond the glass, hoofprints cut through the dust behind the building and turned east toward Red Creek. Silas arrived a moment later with Clara and Edwin Vale. He should not have been walking so soon after the pain in his chest, but anger had put strength back into him. Clara entered first. "Harlan." No one answered. She looked at the empty bunk and then at Caleb. He may have gone after something. At dusk, Caleb asked gently. He could have had a reason. Caleb did not argue. Silas searched the room with hard, careful eyes. His rifle is gone. Vale stepped toward the window. Perhaps he learned we were coming. Silas turned on him. No one knew you were coming. I sent a telegram from Helena this morning. To whom? To you. I received no telegram. The four of them stood still. Outside, the last light was fading behind the low hills. Clara's face changed as the meaning settled over her. Someone took it before it reached the house. Silas looked toward the stable. Who brought the afternoon post? Caleb answered. Tom Bell. Tom was the youngest ranch hand on the Broken Spur, a thin boy of 19 who had come west after his father died. He was honest but easily frightened, and Harlan often gave him the smaller jobs no one else wanted. Silas walked back into the yard. Find him. They found Tom near the cookhouse, holding a bucket of scraps for the dogs. When he saw Silas approaching, the color left his face. That frightened Clara more than any confession could have. Silas stopped several feet away. Did you collect the post today? Tom swallowed. Yes, sir. Was there a telegram? The bucket trembled in his hands. Caleb stepped closer, not to threaten him, but to keep the boy from running. Silas's voice remained quiet. Tell me the truth. Tom looked toward the dark hills. Harlan took it. Clara closed her eyes. Why? Silas asked. He said it was ranch business. Said you told him to read anything from Helena. I never told him that. Tom's breathing grew quick. I did not know, Mr. Mercer. I swear I did not. Silas studied him for a long moment. Did Harlan leave alone? Tom looked down. Answer him, Caleb said. The boy's lips moved, but no sound came. Caleb placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever happened, the truth will help more now than silence. Tom looked at him, shame written plainly across his face. A man met him beyond the east pasture. What man? Vale asked. I could not see his face. He wore a dark coat and rode a gray horse. Clara looked at Vale. Gideon Shaw rides a gray. Vale gave one slow nod. Tom continued. They spoke near the old cottonwoods. Harlan handed him something wrapped in cloth. The deed, Silas said. The word came out like a stone. Clara turned away from the boy. She had defended Harlan only minutes earlier. Now memories moved through her mind in a different light. Harlan asking which drawer held her father's papers. Harlan appearing near the study when he had no business inside the house. Harlan warning Silas not to trust new legal men from Helena. Small things that once meant nothing now seemed to form a road. Silas looked east. How much of a lead does he have? Maybe half an hour, Caleb said. I am going after him. Clara caught her father's sleeve. You can barely stand. He knows every trail on my land. And your heart may stop before you reach the creek. Silas looked at her sharply. The fear in her voice ended the argument. Caleb went toward the stable. I will ride. Silas turned. No. You need someone who can follow him in the dark. You are one man. So is Harlan. We do not know who is waiting for him. Caleb stopped near the hitching rail. His horse lifted its head as he approached. If Harlan reaches Red Creek with the deed, Shaw can destroy it or change it. Then all we have is a false signature and a missing paper. Vale looked at Silas. He is right. Clara stepped toward Caleb. You are not riding alone. He faced her. Yes, I am. This is my ranch. And that is why you need to stay here. Her eyes hardened. You do not give me orders. No, ma'am. Then saddle my horse. Caleb lowered his voice. If Harlan comes back another way, your father needs someone here who knows every room and every record. Mr. Vale needs help searching the study, and Silas needs you more than he needs another rider. Clara looked at her father. The old man had one hand pressed discreetly against his chest again. Caleb had seen it. So had she. Her anger weakened. Bring him back, she said. I will try. Bring back the deed. Caleb nodded. Then Clara stepped closer and took something from her dress pocket. It was a narrow blue ribbon, faded with age. My mother tied this around my first saddle, she said. I carry it when I need courage. Caleb looked at the ribbon in her open palm. I cannot take that. You can return it. The words held more than either of them was ready to say. Caleb accepted it carefully and tied it around the inside strap of his glove. Clara watched his hands. For one brief moment, neither of them noticed anyone else in the yard. Silas noticed. Even with betrayal closing around his ranch and pain pressing against his ribs, he saw the way Caleb handled the ribbon as though it were more valuable than the money pouch he had returned that morning. Not because of what it was. Because it belonged to Clara. Caleb mounted. Silas came to the horse's shoulder. Harlan is not a fool, he said. If he knows you followed him, he may lead you away from Red Creek. Then I will watch the horse, not the man. Silas's eyes narrowed with approval. Bring yourself back, too. Caleb touched the brim of his hat. Then he rode east. Darkness came quickly across the Montana grasslands. The wind had dropped, leaving the land unnaturally quiet. Caleb followed the tracks past the east pasture, where the trail divided near the cottonwoods. One set of prints continued toward Red Creek. Another turned north. He dismounted and crouched beside them. The eastbound trail was deep and uneven, made by a horse carrying a rider at speed. The northern trail was lighter. A loose horse. Harlan had sent one animal toward Red Creek to draw pursuit. Caleb stood and looked north. Beyond the hills lay an abandoned mining road that curved back toward Gideon Shaw's southern range. He mounted again. You are clever, Harlan, he whispered. Then his horse's ears lifted. Far ahead, metal struck stone. A hoof. Caleb followed the sound into a narrow cut between the hills. Moonlight touched the rocks, pale and cold. The trail tightened until there was barely room for two horses side by side. Then a voice came from the darkness. You should have stayed at the ranch, Reed. Caleb stopped. Harlan Danner stepped into the moonlight above him, standing on a shelf of rock with a rifle in his hands. His face carried no shame. Only exhaustion. You were always too curious, Harlan said. Caleb kept both hands where Harlan could see them. Where is the deed? Harlan gave a sad smile. You still think this is about a piece of paper. A second rider appeared behind Caleb. Then a third. Caleb heard horses closing the trail at his back. Harlan looked down at him. Silas Mercer is not the only man on that ranch who has been keeping secrets. Caleb did not turn toward the riders behind him. The narrow trail gave him no room to run, and the moonlight showed Harlan's rifle clearly enough. One quick move would end the conversation before the truth began. He kept his voice calm. What secret? Harlan lowered the rifle a little. Silas Mercer has spent 20 years telling people the Broken Spur belongs to him. It does. No, Harlan said. Part of it belongs to my family. The two riders behind Caleb moved closer. Their horses breathed heavily in the cold air. Caleb recognized one of the men by his broad shoulders. Wade Crowley worked for Gideon Shaw. The other kept his hat low over his face. Harlan stepped down from the rock shelf. My father found the spring in the upper valley before Silas ever fenced it. He worked that ground with him, broke his back there. Then Mercer put his name on everything and left my father with wages. Caleb watched Harlan's face. There was anger there, but beneath it sat an older wound, one that had been fed for years. You stayed at the Broken Spur 11 years, Caleb said. Why? To wait. For what? For Silas to admit what he did. And when he did not, you went to Shaw. Harlan's jaw tightened. Shaw listened. Shaw buys wounded men with promises. He offered justice. He offered you a share of the upper valley. The silence confirmed it. Caleb looked toward the cloth bundle tied behind Harlan's saddle. The deed. You forged the loan papers. Harlan's eyes hardened. I copied a signature. The land was never truly his. That is not justice. You do not know what justice is. Caleb thought of Clara standing in the ranch yard, placing her mother's ribbon in his hand. He thought of Silas bent over the kitchen table, fighting for breath. I know it does not require lying. Harlan's rifle rose again. Careful. The hidden rider behind Caleb laughed softly. Wade Crowley spoke. Enough talking. Shaw wants the paper tonight. Harlan looked back at him. He will get it. Caleb heard the strain in Harlan's voice. He had expected Shaw's men to help him. Instead, they had come to make certain he obeyed. That meant Harlan was not fully trusted. It also meant Caleb might still have a chance. Does Shaw know your father signed away his claim? Caleb asked. Harlan went still. What did you say? Silas keeps old partnership records. You are lying. Maybe, but if your father had a lawful claim, Shaw would not need a false loan. The word struck where Caleb intended. Harlan's eyes moved toward the bundle behind his saddle. For the first time, doubt entered his face. Wade Crowley swore under his breath. Do not listen to him. Caleb continued. Shaw does not plan to give you anything. Once he has the deed, the false debt, and the upper valley, what will he need you for? Harlan looked at Wade. The man's hand rested near his revolver. That small movement answered more than words could. Harlan stepped back. You said the agreement was signed. It is, Wade replied. I have not seen it. You will. When this is finished. Harlan's grip shifted on the rifle. The second rider moved suddenly. Moonlight touched his face. Tom Bell. Caleb's chest tightened. The young ranch hand looked terrified. His hands were tied loosely around the saddle horn, and a dark mark showed along his cheek. Tom, Caleb said. The boy lifted his head. They caught me near the east pasture, he whispered. I tried to warn you. Wade struck the back of Tom's shoulder. Quiet. Harlan looked sharply at him. You told me the boy followed us willingly. Wade smiled. Does it matter? It matters to me. Wade's expression changed. Caleb saw the moment Harlan understood. Shaw had never viewed him as a partner, only as a useful thief. The wind returned, moving through the narrow cut with a low sound. Caleb's horse shifted beneath him. He rested one hand lightly against its neck. Let Tom go, Harlan said. Wade laughed. You are in no position to give orders. Harlan turned the rifle toward him. For half a second, no one moved. Then the second Shaw rider drew his gun. Caleb kicked his horse forward. The animal lunged up the trail, striking Harlan's shoulder and forcing the rifle aside. A shot broke the night, loud enough to shake dust from the rocks. Caleb grabbed Harlan's coat and pulled him down behind the horse. Wade's mount reared. Tom threw himself sideways, dragging the reins with him. His horse crashed against Wade's, blocking the narrow path. "Run!" Caleb shouted. Tom twisted free of the loose rope and stumbled toward the rocks. Harlan rolled to one knee. The rifle lay several feet away. Caleb reached it first. He did not aim at the men. He fired into the ground near their horses. Both animals panicked and backed down the trail. Wade cursed as he fought for control. Caleb grabbed Tom by the arm and pulled him behind the stone shelf. Harlan stood frozen in the moonlight. The cloth bundle had fallen from his saddle. Wade saw it. He jumped down and ran toward the deed. Harlan reached it first. For one terrible moment, the two men faced each other over the paper that could destroy the Broken Spur. "You promised me my family's land," Harlan said. Wade smiled coldly. "Your family never owned enough dirt to bury itself in." The truth finally broke something inside Harlan. He shoved the bundle into Caleb's hands. "Take it." Wade drew his revolver. Harlan struck his arm aside just as another shot tore through the silence. The bullet missed Caleb, but Harlan fell against the rocks. Caleb caught him before his head struck the ground. Wade and the other rider mounted and fled south, their hoofbeats fading into the hills. Tom stared after them, shaking. Caleb pressed one hand against Harlan's side. There was blood, but not enough to tell how deep the wound was. Harlan looked at the deed clutched in Caleb's other hand. "I was wrong," he whispered. Caleb said nothing. "I thought Silas stole from my father." "Did he?" Harlan's eyes filled with pain deeper than the wound. "I found a letter in Shaw's office. My father sold his share willingly. Silas paid every dollar." Caleb leaned closer. "Then why continue?" "Because by then I had already forged the papers." His voice broke. "And I was too proud to walk back carrying the truth." Sometimes the hardest trail is not the one through darkness, but the one that leads a man back from his own mistake. If you believe the truth still matters after someone has failed, stay with this story. Harlan gripped Caleb's sleeve. "There is more." Caleb looked down at him. "Shaw is not waiting in Red Creek." "Where is he?" Harlan swallowed painfully. "At the Broken Spur." Caleb's heart seemed to stop. "He planned this chase to empty the ranch," Harlan whispered. "The deed was never his only target." Far behind them, beyond the dark hills, a faint orange glow touched the sky. Caleb turned toward it. It came from the direction of home. The orange glow grew brighter as Caleb climbed the last ridge. Behind him, Tom rode with Harlan slumped across the saddle between them. The wounded foreman had tied a strip of shirt around his side, but the cloth was already dark. Caleb wanted to push the horses harder. He did not. A dead horse would help no one. The Broken Spur lay beyond the next rise, hidden by low hills and scattered pine. Smoke rolled across the moonlit sky, thin at first, then thick enough to stink the eyes. Tom's voice shook. "Is it the house?" Caleb listened. No crack of burning roof beams. No sharp roar of a full structure fire. Only horses crying in the distance, and the low rush of wind through dry grass. "The hay barn," he said. Harlan lifted his head weakly. "Shaw said he would burn the winter stores." Caleb looked back at him. "Why?" "To force Silas to sell before the cold months." The answer carried the coldness of a plan made by a man who understood hunger and intended to use it. They reached the top of the ridge. Below them, the ranch yard had become a field of moving shadows. The hay barn burned along its western wall. Flames crawled up the dry boards while ranch hands formed a line from the water trough. Buckets passed from hand to hand. Sparks lifted into the night and blew toward the stable roof. Clara stood near the well, her sleeves rolled above her elbows. She carried water with the men, her skirt dark with mud and ash. Silas was nowhere in sight. Caleb rode down the hill. Clara. She turned at the sound of his voice. For 1 second, relief crossed her face. Then she saw Harlan. The bucket slipped from her hands and struck the ground. Caleb dismounted before his horse stopped moving. "Where is your father?" "Inside the house." "Is he hurt?" "I don't know." Her eyes moved to the cloth bundle tied beneath Caleb's coat. "The deed." "I have it." Clara closed her eyes briefly. A breath left her that sounded almost like a prayer. Then Harlan groaned. The relief disappeared. "What happened to him?" "Shaw's men." Harlan looked at her from the saddle. He could not hold her gaze. "I am sorry, Clara." She stared at him. The man who had taught her to ride now sat bent and bleeding beneath the ranch fire he had helped bring upon them. Her face hardened. Sorry does not put out flames. Harlan lowered his head. Caleb helped Tom carry him toward the cookhouse. Lay him on the table, heat water, find clean cloth. Tom nodded quickly. Clara caught Caleb's arm. "Gideon Shaw is here." Caleb turned toward the house. "Where?" "He came through the front gate before the fire started. He said he wanted to speak with Pa." "And you let him inside?" "He had 2 men with him. One held a torch near the hay barn." Her voice tightened with anger. "Pa told us not to fight. Shaw said the fire would stay small if he was allowed into the house." Caleb looked at the flames. Shaw had lied about that too. "Who is with Silas?" "Mr. Vale." "Anyone else?" Shaw brought a county deputy. Caleb frowned. "Which deputy?" "Frank Lyle." He knew the name. Lyle had a badge, but men in Red Creek said Gideon Shaw had paid for everything else he owned. Caleb checked the rifle in his hand. 1 round remained. Clara saw him do it. "No shooting." "If Shaw threatens your father." "No." She stepped closer. "Pa is sick. 1 gunshot inside that house could finish what his heart started." Caleb looked toward the porch. Through the window, 3 shadows moved behind the curtains. One belonged to Silas. Another stood broad and still. Gideon Shaw. Caleb handed the rifle to Tom. "Keep this near Harlan." Then he looked at Clara. "Stay outside." She almost laughed. "You know better than to say that to me." Despite the fire, despite the danger, something in Caleb's face softened. "Yes," he said, "I do." They crossed the yard together. At the porch steps, Silas's voice carried through the door. "You have a false debt and a bought deputy. That is not ownership." Shaw answered calmly. "It is enough ownership for a court that only sees paper." Caleb opened the door. The room smelled of smoke and lamp oil. Silas sat behind his desk. Edwin Vale stood at his right shoulder. Deputy Lyle remained near the wall with 1 hand resting on his gun belt. Gideon Shaw stood at the center of the room in a dark coat, perfectly clean despite the ash blowing outside. He turned when Caleb entered. His eyes went first to Caleb's face, then to the bundle beneath his coat. "I wondered how far Harlan would get," Shaw said. "Far enough to tell the truth." For the first time, Shaw's calm expression shifted. Silas rose. "You found him." "He is alive." Clara stepped into the room behind Caleb. "And the deed is safe." Shaw looked at her with mild disappointment. "You should have accepted my offer last year, Miss Mercer. Your father's pride has cost this ranch dearly." Clara walked to the desk and stood beside Silas. "My father refused because the ranch was not yours. By morning, that may no longer matter." Vale spoke. The original deed proves the debt is false. Shaw smiled. Only if it reaches a court. Deputy Lyle drew his revolver. He did it slowly, as though performing an official duty. Hand over the papers, he said. Caleb did not move. Outside, the men shouted as part of the barn roof collapsed. Silas's hand pressed against his chest. Clara saw it. So did Shaw. He stepped closer to the desk. You are tired, Mercer. Sign the upper valley to me tonight and I will call my men away. Refuse, and the next fire may reach the house. Silas looked at the flames beyond the window. Then at his daughter. For one terrible moment, Caleb believed he might agree. Silas reached for the pen. Clara's breath caught. But instead of signing, he pushed the paper aside. You made one mistake, Shaw. Shaw's eyes narrowed. You thought this ranch belonged to one old man. A horse thundered into the yard outside. Then another. Voices rose beyond the porch. Many voices. Deputy Lyle turned toward the window. Lanterns appeared along the road leading from Red Creek. Ranchers, shopkeepers, and townsmen rode through the gate in a long line. At their front was the county judge. Beside him rode the clerk who had discovered the false claim. Shaw's face finally lost its calm. Vale looked at Silas in surprise. You sent for them. Silas shook his head. No. Caleb looked toward the doorway. Tom stood there, pale and breathing hard. I found the telegram Harlan took, he said. There was another message beneath it. He held up a folded paper. It was from the judge. Mr. Vale had already warned him. The writers surrounded the house. Gideon Shaw looked from the windows to the deed beneath Caleb's coat. Then he smiled again. But this time there was fear behind it. You may have witnesses, he said quietly, but none of them know what Silas Mercer did 30 years ago. The room went still. Shaw turned toward Clara. Your father did not build the Broken Spur alone. Silas's face changed. And Clara knew before he spoke that this time Gideon Shaw was telling the truth. No one in the room moved. Outside, the fire still snapped at the hay barn, and men shouted as they dragged wet blankets across the roof. But inside Silas Mercer's study, the only sound was the small ticking clock above the bookshelf. Clara looked at her father. What did you do? Silas kept one hand on the desk. For years, Clara had believed there were no hidden rooms inside him. He was stern, stubborn, and often quiet, but never mysterious. He had taught her that a person's word should stand straight even when the person could not. Now his silence felt like a locked door. Gideon Shaw watched her face with satisfaction. Ask him who owned the first half of this ranch. Silas looked at the judge standing in the doorway. Judge Amos Bell was a square-built man with silver whiskers and a coat covered in road dust. 2 ranchers stood behind him, along with the county clerk and several townsmen. Shaw, the judge said, you are in no position to accuse anyone. Deputy Lyle, set your weapon down. Lyle hesitated. The ranchers behind the judge shifted closer. Slowly, the deputy placed his revolver on the floor. Shaw did not appear concerned. You came for forged papers, he said. You may leave with a better crime. Silas lowered himself into his chair. Clara took one step toward him. Pa. He looked at her then. Not like a rancher. Like a father who had delayed a truth until it had grown too heavy to carry. Before the Broken Spur had a name, he said, there were 2 men on this land. Harlan's father, Caleb said. Silas nodded. Elias Danner. Harlan's name seemed to pass through the room like smoke. Silas folded his hands. Elias and I came west together. We had 1 mule, 2 blankets, and enough money to last through 1 hard month. He knew cattle. I knew accounts. We found the spring in the upper valley and built a cabin there. Clara's voice was quiet. Why have you never told me? Because the story did not end well. Shaw gave a short laugh. That depends on who tells it. Silas ignored him. The first winter nearly ruined us. We lost animals, food, and most of what little money we had. By spring, Elias wanted out. He had a wife expecting a child and no wish to bury them in Montana snow. Harlan, Caleb said. Yes, Harlan was that child. Silas looked toward the dark window. Elias sold me his half. I paid him fairly, every dollar we agreed on. You told no one, Clara said. I had the papers. The papers Harlan stole. Silas nodded. Clara looked toward Shaw. Then what crime is he speaking of? Shaw stepped closer. The money Mercer used to buy Elias out was stolen. Silas closed his eyes. Clara stared at him. Caleb felt the room tighten around them. Judge Bell spoke carefully. Silas, is that true? The old rancher opened his eyes again. Yes. A murmur moved through the people near the doorway. Clara's face went still. From whom? A railroad payroll wagon. Even Shaw had not expected such a direct answer. Silas continued before anyone could interrupt. I did not rob it. A storm overturned the wagon near Bitter Pass. One guard died, the other had already fled. I found a strongbox in the snow. And you kept it, Clara said. Silas's voice roughened. I kept part of it. She turned away. The lamp beside her moved in a draft, throwing light across the old family photograph on the shelf. Caleb watched her reach for the back of a chair. Her fingers trembled against the wood. Silas spoke to her, but his words were for everyone. I was 26, hungry, proud, certain the world owed me something because I had suffered. I took enough money to buy Elias' share, then buried the rest beneath the old cabin. Judge Bell frowned. Why did you never return it? I intended to. When the ranch succeeded, when I could repay it without losing everything. Shaw smiled. But success made the decision harder. Silas looked at him. No, cowardice did. That answer silenced the room. Caleb understood then why Silas had spent years judging men by what they did when no one watched. He had once failed that test himself. Did my mother know? Clara asked. Silas's face softened with pain. Not until many years later. And what did she say? She told me the ranch would never truly be ours until I made it right. Clara's eyes filled. Did you? Silas looked toward Edwin Vale. The attorney opened his leather case and withdrew a yellowed packet tied with plain string. I have the records, Vale said. Shaw's smile disappeared. Silas explained. 15 years ago, I sent repayment to the railroad company through Vale. Every dollar I took with interest. Judge Bell accepted the packet and read the first page. The company acknowledged payment. Yes. Then why keep it secret? Because repaying money does not erase taking it. Clara turned back to him. You built our life on it. I built the first piece of it on it, Silas said. Everything after came through work, but I never forgot where the beginning came from. Shaw's voice sharpened. This changes nothing. Stolen money purchased the Danner share. The sale was tainted. Vale answered at once. Elias Danner received lawful payment and signed a lawful transfer. Whatever Silas did before payment does not make Harlan the owner. Shaw looked toward Judge Bell. You cannot dismiss it. I can dismiss your forged debt, the judge said, and I can arrest the men responsible for it. Deputy Lyle's face went pale. Shaw stepped toward the door. Caleb blocked him. For a moment, The two men stood close enough to hear each other breathe. Shaw's calm mask finally broke. "You think honesty saves a man," he said. "No," Caleb replied, "but it gives him somewhere to stand when the truth comes." Behind them, Silas struggled to rise. Clara moved toward him by instinct, but stopped halfway. The distance between them was only a few feet. It looked wider than the entire ranch. Silas reached for the sealed letter beneath the ledger and held it out to her. "I wrote this because I knew I might not have the courage to tell you while I lived." Clara did not take it. "You had courage for Storms, Banks, and men like Shaw." Her voice broke. "But not for me." Silas lowered the letter. Before he could answer, Tom appeared in the doorway from the cookhouse. His face was white. "Caleb," he said, "you need to come." Caleb turned. "It is Harlan." Clara looked toward the yard. Tom swallowed. "He has been asking for Silas." Silas pushed himself upright. "What does he want?" Tom looked at the old rancher with fear in his eyes. "He says the letter his father left proves someone else knew about the money." Shaw stopped moving. For the first time that night, true panic crossed his face. And Caleb understood that the oldest secret on the Broken Spur had not yet been fully told. Harlan lay on the cookhouse table beneath a yellow lantern. His coat had been cut open. Clean cloth covered the wound in his side, and a basin of red water sat on the floor beside him. Tom stood near the stove with both hands wrapped around a cup he had forgotten to drink from. When Silas entered, Harlan turned his head. The effort made pain tighten across his face. "You should be in bed," Harlan whispered. Silas leaned against Caleb's arm. "So should you." Clara followed them inside but remained near the door. She had not touched her father since the truth came out. The distance between them had become careful and quiet. Judge Bell, Edwin Vale, and Gideon Shaw entered behind her. Two ranchers stood on either side of Shaw now, leaving him no path to the yard. Harlan's eyes found him. "You lied to me." Shaw's face returned to its calm shape. "You lied to yourself long before I met you." Harlan tried to rise. Caleb placed one hand on his shoulder. "Save your strength." "There is no strength worth saving if I stay silent." His fingers moved toward his shirt pocket, but he could not reach it. Tom stepped forward and removed a folded paper from beneath the torn cloth. The letter was worn soft at the edges. Harlan looked at Silas. "My father wrote this before he died." Silas went still. "Went?" 20 years ago. I found it in my mother's Bible after she was gone." Tom handed the letter to Caleb, who passed it to Silas. The old rancher stared at the handwriting. "He knew it." Clara saw recognition move across his face. "Read it aloud," Judge Bell said. Silas unfolded the page. His hands shook. "Silas," he began, "if this reaches you, I am likely gone. I have carried something too long, and I fear my boy may one day carry my anger without knowing the truth." Harlan closed his eyes. Silas continued. "I sold you my share freely. You paid what we agreed, but I knew where some of that money came from." Clara looked toward Harlan. The wounded man's face had gone wet with silent tears. Silas read on. "I saw the strongbox in the cabin. I asked no questions because I needed the money. I told myself that made it your sin and not mine. It did not. I accepted what I suspected was wrong because it saved me from a hard life." The lantern flame moved in the draft. Silas paused at the next line. Caleb noticed Gideon Shaw shift his weight. "Keep reading," Harlan said. Silas did. "There was a third man at Bitter Pass. He found the wagon before either of us. His name was Nathaniel Shaw." Gideon's father. Everyone in the room looked at him. Shaw's face had lost all warmth. Silas read faster now. Nathaniel opened the strongbox. He took the greater portion and left the rest in the snow when he heard riders coming. Silas found what remained. Nathaniel later learned Silas had used part of it to buy my share. He threatened us both with the truth unless we gave him access to the upper valley. Judge Bell looked at Gideon. Your father tried to claim the water. Shaw said nothing. Silas reached the final lines. I refused him. Silas refused him. Nathaniel swore his family would own that valley one day. If my son ever hears a different story, tell him I was not cheated by Silas Mercer. I was ashamed of myself and blamed my friend because blame was easier to carry than guilt. Silas lowered the page. The cookhouse fell silent. Harlan stared at the ceiling. All these years, he said, I thought my father died believing you had wronged him. Silas stepped closer to the table. I thought he died hating me too. He did not. No. Harlan turned his eyes toward Clara. I watched you grow up. I taught you to ride. Your mother trusted me in her home. His breathing became uneven. And I repaid that kindness by opening your father's desk. Clara's face was pale, but her voice held steady. Why did you not bring him the letter? Because it cleared him and condemned my father. He swallowed. I wanted my anger more than I wanted the truth. Those words struck the room harder than any accusation. Caleb looked at Shaw. You found Harlan's weakness and gave it a purpose. Shaw gave a cold smile. I offered him what Silas took. No, Harlan said. You offered me a story that allowed me to stay bitter. Judge Bell held out his hand. Silas, give me the letter. Silas passed it to him. The judge read the page again, then looked toward the two ranchers guarding Shaw. Take Mr. Shaw to the main house. Deputy Lyle will go with him. No one leaves before morning. Shaw did not resist. As he passed Harlan, he stopped. You think confessing makes you better than me? Harlan looked at him weakly. No. He drew one careful breath. But it makes tomorrow different from today. The ranchers led Shaw away. Tom sat down heavily near the stove. Outside, the fire had begun to die. Wet ash drifted through the yard like black snow. If you have ever seen someone lose years to pride, let this moment stay with you. Sometimes the first step toward healing is not being forgiven. It is finally telling the truth without asking what it will cost. Silas took the chair beside Harlan. You should have come to me. I know. I should have told you about your father. I know that too. For a moment, they looked at each other not as owner and foreman, but as two men standing in the ruins of an old friendship they had inherited. Harlan reached beneath the blanket and pulled out a small iron key. I took more than the deed. Silas frowned. What? The lower drawer in your study, the one you keep locked. Clara looked at her father. Silas's face tightened. Harlan placed the key in Caleb's palm. Shaw wanted what was inside. Caleb closed his fingers around it. What is in the drawer? Silas did not answer. Clara stepped forward. Pa. The old rancher stared at the key. Then he looked at Caleb. Bring me the black ledger. Caleb went to the door. Behind him, Silas spoke with the voice of a man who knew there would be no more hiding. That ledger contains the names of every family Gideon Shaw's father ruined. Clara's breath caught. Silas looked toward the dark ranch yard. And one of those names belongs to Caleb Reed. Caleb stopped in the doorway. For a moment, the dying fire outside seemed to vanish. He heard only the quiet crack of wood in the stove and the slow breathing of the wounded man behind him. My name. Silas looked older beneath the lantern light. Bring the ledger. Caleb did not move. Clara watched him carefully. She had seen him face armed men in the hills without losing his calm. Now his hand had tightened around the small iron key until the edge pressed white against his skin. "What does Shaw's family have to do with Caleb?" she asked. Silas lowered his eyes. "More than I knew when I hired him." Caleb turned and walked back toward the main house. Clara followed. Neither spoke as they crossed the yard. The hay barn still smoked, but the worst of the flames had been beaten down. Ranch hands stood in wet shirts and soot-covered coats, passing water over the last glowing boards. The Broken Spur had survived the night. Caleb was no longer certain his past would. Inside the study, the room remained as they had left it. Papers covered the desk. Deputy Lyle sat in a chair near the wall with his hands tied. Gideon Shaw stood by the window under the watch of two ranchers. When Caleb entered, Shaw smiled. "So Silas finally told you." Caleb ignored him. He knelt beside the desk and placed the key in the lock of the lower drawer. It turned with a heavy click. Inside lay a black leather ledger, several old letters, and a small silver watch with a cracked glass face. Caleb froze. He knew the watch. His father had carried it every day of Caleb's childhood. He lifted it slowly. The chain slipped through his fingers. Clara saw the change in his face. "That belonged to him." Caleb nodded. "My father said he lost it before I was born." Shaw laughed under his breath. "He lost more than that." Caleb stood and faced him. "What did your father do?" Shaw leaned against the window frame. "You have spent years pretending your family was poor because the land was hard and luck was worse. That is a comforting story." One of the ranchers told him to be quiet. Caleb raised a hand. "No, let him speak." Shaw's eyes brightened. "Your father, Daniel Reed, owned a small cattle claim east of Bitter Pass. Good water, better grass than most men had. Nathaniel Shaw wanted it." Caleb remembered the land only in fragments. A cabin with a crooked chimney. His mother hanging sheets in the wind. His father standing at the fence, looking toward riders in the distance. "We lost it after a bad winter," Caleb said. "That is what you were told." Shaw nodded toward the ledger. "Read it." Caleb opened the book. The first pages contained names, dates, loan amounts, and pieces of property. Some entries were marked with a black cross. Others had notes written in Silas's hand. False valuation. Witness paid. Signature copied. Debt collected before due date. Clara moved closer, reading beside him. Caleb turned several pages. Then he found it. Daniel Reed. The entry stated that Nathaniel Shaw had offered Caleb's father a small emergency loan after the winter of 1871. The repayment date had later been changed without Daniel's knowledge. When he failed to pay on the altered date, Shaw took the land, the cattle, and nearly everything inside the house. At the bottom of the page, Silas had written one final line. Daniel Reed protested. County clerk refused to hear him. Caleb stared at the words. "How did you get this?" Silas had entered the study behind them. He stood in the doorway with one hand on the frame. Nathaniel kept records of every deal. Why would he record his own crimes? Because he believed they proved he was clever. Silas stepped into the room. After he died, a former bookkeeper brought the ledger to me. The man had spent years helping him and wanted to clear his conscience before his own death. Caleb held up the watch. "And this. It was taken from your father when Shaw's men forced him from the land." The room blurred for Caleb. He remembered his father's hands shaking in winter. He remembered his mother cutting one loaf into pieces too small for 3 people. He remembered Daniel Reed working until fever took him, still apologizing because he could not leave his son anything. All those years, Caleb had believed poverty was simply the life they had been given. Now he knew it had been chosen for them by another man. You knew my name when I came here, Caleb said. Silas nodded. I did. And you said nothing. I was not certain you were Daniel's son at first. You became certain. Yes. Went. Within a month. Caleb closed the ledger. The sound echoed through the room. You watched me for 2 years. You tested me. You let me believe I arrived here with nothing. Silas accepted the anger without defending himself. I was trying to find a way to return what had been taken from your family. By giving me work. No. Silas looked at Clara, then back at Caleb. By giving you the eastern pasture. Clara's head turned sharply. The eastern pasture. It borders the old Reed claim. I bought that land from Shaw's company 6 years ago. Shaw pushed away from the window. You bought it through another name. So your father would not know. Silas continued. I intended to place it in Daniel Reed's name, but by the time the sale was complete, he was gone. Then Caleb came to the ranch. Caleb's anger did not fade. Why did you not tell me? Because I did not know what kind of man you were. There it was. The truth beneath every quiet observation, every hidden test, every question Silas had asked. Caleb's voice lowered. You thought I might become like Shaw if I owned land. I thought sudden wealth reveals what hardship sometimes hides. And did I pass? Silas flinched. Clara stepped between them. He is not one of your cattle to be judged before purchase. Silas looked at her. I know that now. No, she said, you knew it before, you were simply afraid to trust him. Caleb looked down at the silver watch. A deep anger moved through him, but it was not clean anger. Silas had hidden the truth. Yet he had also recovered land that never belonged to him and kept evidence that could restore other families. Nothing in the room was simple anymore. Gideon Shaw watched them with pleasure. You see what honesty brings, he said. It tears people apart. Caleb turned toward him. No. He placed the watch carefully on the desk. Lies do that. Honesty only shows the damage. Judge Bell entered behind Silas and took the ledger. He read several pages, then looked at Shaw. This is enough to reopen every disputed claim your father handled. Shaw's face changed. You cannot prove those notes are true. We have the bookkeeper's letters, Silas said. Vale entered carrying the packet from his case. And sworn statements from 2 county clerks. Judge Bell nodded to the ranchers. Take Shaw and Lyle to Red Creek. Shaw resisted then, but only for a moment. As they led him toward the door, he looked back at Caleb. You think the land will make you whole? Caleb answered quietly. No land can return a father. Shaw was taken outside. The room emptied slowly until only Silas, Clara, and Caleb remained. Silas placed a folded deed on the desk. The eastern pasture is yours. It has been for nearly a year. I never recorded the transfer because I wanted to speak to you first. Caleb did not touch it. Silas's voice weakened. I was wrong to wait. Yes, Caleb said. The old man nodded. I thought time would help me choose the right moment. It usually chooses for us. Clara looked between them, tears standing in her eyes. Silas pressed a hand to his chest. This time he could not hide the pain. His knees gave way. Caleb reached him first. Together he and Clara lowered Silas into the chair. The old rancher struggled for breath, his face turning gray. Get the doctor, Clara cried. Tom appeared in the doorway and ran for a horse. Silas caught Caleb's sleeve. Listen to me. Save your strength. There may not be enough to save. Clara knelt beside him. Pa, do not say that. Silas looked at his daughter, then at Caleb. I spent my life trying to repair one dishonest choice by controlling every choice that followed. His hand trembled against Caleb's arm. I cannot choose for either of you now. Clara took her father's hand. Silas looked toward the deed on the desk. The land is yours whether you stay or leave. Then his eyes moved to Clara. And her heart is hers. Caleb felt Clara's fingers close around his free hand. Silas saw it. A faint peace crossed his face. But before he could speak again, a rider shouted from the yard. Tom had not reached the gate. He had found the doctor already coming up the road. And beside the doctor rode a woman Caleb had not seen in 18 years. She dismounted beneath the porch lantern, lifted her face toward the study window, and called his name. Caleb went still. It was his mother. Caleb crossed the study before anyone could stop him. The woman stood beneath the porch lantern with one hand gripping the saddle horn. Her hair had turned silver at the temples, and the years had drawn fine lines around her mouth, but he knew her face before she lifted her eyes. "Mama." Rachel Reed took one step toward him. Then she stopped. For 18 years, Caleb had imagined this moment in 100 different ways. In some, he was angry. In others, he turned away. Sometimes he asked why she had vanished after his father died and left him with strangers near Cheyenne. But now, with smoke drifting over the ranch and Silas fighting for breath inside, Caleb could only stare. Rachel reached into her coat and removed a folded letter. "I thought you were dead," she said. His face tightened. "You left me." "No." Her voice broke. "I was told you had been taken east with the preacher's family after the fever. When I came back for you, the cabin was empty." Caleb remembered the winter after his father's death. A church wagon. A woman who said his mother had gone away and would not return. He had believed that sentence because children often believe the cruelest explanation first. "Who told you?" he asked. Rachel looked toward the ranchers leading Gideon Shaw across the yard. "Nathaniel Shaw." The name seemed to darken the porch. "He said Daniel owed him money," Rachel continued. "He offered me work in Helena and promised to send for you. When I refused to sign over what little remained of our claim, he took me to the territorial jail on a false theft charge." Caleb stared at her. "How long?" "6 months. By the time I was released, you were gone." She held out the letter. "I spent years asking after you. Every town, every ranch office, every church register I could find." Caleb did not take the paper. "Why come now?" "Mr. Vale found me." Edwin Vale stepped onto the porch. "The old bookkeeper's records included Mrs. Reed's name. I sent inquiries months ago. Her reply reached Helena last week." Rachel looked at Caleb. "I wrote as soon as I knew where you were." Behind them, Clara called his name. Caleb turned. Silas had fallen unconscious. The doctor hurried through the doorway carrying a black case. Caleb and Rachel followed him inside. For the next hour, the house waited. No one spoke above a whisper. The doctor worked beside Silas while Clara sat near the bed holding her father's hand. Caleb remained in the hall with Rachel. Between them lay 18 lost years and no easy bridge across them. At last, she placed the folded letter on the bench beside him. "You do not have to forgive me tonight." Caleb looked at the worn paper. "I do not know what to believe." "Then do not believe me because I am your mother." She folded her hands in her lap. "Read the letter, ask Mr. Vale, ask the jail keeper in Helena, ask anyone who can prove what happened." Caleb turned toward her. "You want me to investigate you?" A sad smile touched her face. "I want you to know the truth, even if it does not bring you back to me." That answer sounded like something Daniel Reed would have said. Caleb picked up the letter. Before he opened it, the bedroom door moved. The doctor stepped out. Clara rose quickly. Is he alive? Yes. Her knees nearly gave way. Caleb caught her. The doctor removed his spectacles. His heart is badly strained. He may have months, perhaps longer if he rests, but he will not run this ranch again. Silas heard him from the bed. That doctor has always been too certain. His voice was weak, but Clara laughed through her tears. It was the first warm sound in the house since the fire began. Morning came pale and quiet over the Broken Spur. Gideon Shaw and Deputy Lyle were taken to Red Creek. In the weeks that followed, Judge Bell reopened the stolen land claims recorded in the Black Ledger. Some families received property. Others received payment from Shaw's seized holdings. Harlan admitted his part in the forged debt and accepted judgment without asking for mercy. Silas spoke for him before the court. He betrayed me, he said, but he also saved a boy's life and returned the proof. Let the truth include all of it. Harlan lost his position at the Broken Spur, but he was not abandoned. After serving his sentence, he found work repairing wagons in Red Creek. Clara visited once and brought him the wooden toy horse Caleb had mended. A reminder, she said, that broken things were not always useless. Rachel stayed near the ranch. Caleb did not call her mama again for many weeks. Trust returned slowly, through old letters, verified records, quiet meals, and stories only she could have known. One evening, she showed him a small scar on her palm from the day he was born. Caleb touched it with one finger. Then he wept for the boy who had believed he was unwanted. Silas recorded the eastern pasture in Caleb's name. Caleb accepted it only after every displaced family in the ledger had been contacted. The land did not make him whole, but it gave him a place to begin. In early autumn, Caleb asked Clara to walk with him to the upper valley. The grass had turned gold, and the spring moved clear between the stones. He carried no fine ring, only the faded blue ribbon she had given him on the night of the fire. I told myself I had nothing to offer you, he said. Clara looked across the valley. You have been wrong about that for a long time. He tied the ribbon around her wrist. I can offer the truth, even when it makes me small. I can offer work. I can offer a home that never closes its door on someone who returns honestly. Clara's eyes filled. And your heart? It was yours before I had the courage to say so. She took his face between her hands and kissed his forehead. Then say it now. I love you. I know, she whispered, but I needed to hear it. They married beneath the cottonwoods the following spring. Silas sat in a chair near the front, wrapped in a dark blanket. Rachel sat beside him. Harlan stood at the edge of the gathering, uncertain whether he belonged until Silas raised one hand and motioned him closer. The Broken Spur never became famous for its wealth. It became known for something better. A place where debts were faced, land was returned, and a person's worst choice did not have to become the final truth about them. If this journey stayed with your heart, remember its lesson. Honesty cannot change yesterday, but it can still save tomorrow. Share the story with someone who believes people can find their way home. Years later, a child found Silas's sealed letter in the study drawer. Clara opened it beside Caleb on the porch. Inside, Silas had written only one sentence. Choose the person who tells the truth when the truth gives him nothing. Caleb looked across the eastern pasture, where his mother walked beside their young son, and the evening sun turned every fence post gold. Clara slipped her hand into his. The ranch stood behind them. The truth stood before them. And for the first time in generations, no one in the Reed or Mercer family had to hide from either one.